My father sent the text at 6:58 on a Wednesday morning while I was standing in my garage wrapping centerpieces in protective foam for his wedding reception. 7 words. Don't come. You're not welcome here anymore. I read it 3 times. Then I set my phone face down on the workbench, looked at the 200 white pillar candles I had spent the previous night individually boxing, and felt something inside me go completely, permanently still. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 36 years old. I own a mid-sized event production company in Raleigh that I built over 8 years from a cargo van, a storage unit, and a personal credit card that used to make me sweat every time I used it. I do full-scale event design, corporate, social, weddings. I have a team of 11. I have a portfolio. I have clients who refer me by name because they trust my work. And for the past 4 months, I had been using all of it, every connection, every vendor discount, every favor I had earned across nearly a decade of professional relationships, to produce my father's second wedding. Not as a client. As his son. Before I tell you what I did next, and what happened to a reception that was supposed to host 200 guests at a rooftop venue downtown, let me ask you something. Have you ever bent yourself completely in half for someone, only to find out they saw you as furniture? Because that morning I finally understood what I had been to my father my entire life. Useful. Invisible. Disposable. And I was done. My father, Robert Reeves, is the kind of man who fills every room he walks into, not with warmth, but with presence. He's 61, broad-shouldered, still carries himself like the college football player he was 40 years ago. He remarried when I was 12, divorced again at 55, and had been dating a woman named Carla Pittman for 3 years before proposing last spring. Carla was fine. I want to be fair about that. She wasn't the villain in this story. She was a quiet, well-dressed woman from Greensboro who seemed to genuinely care about my father and had 2 adult children of her own who I had met exactly twice. The villain was my father. He had always been the villain. I just kept finding ways to write him out of that role so I didn't have to deal with what it meant. My mother had raised me largely alone after their divorce when I was 9. My father had been present in the technical sense. He showed up to the events he deemed important enough, paid the minimum child support without complaint, and called on birthdays. But he had always treated me as an obligation that he was managing, not a son he was raising. As an adult, I had found a way to make peace with that. Or at least I thought I had. What I had actually done was replace the need for his approval with usefulness. If I could not earn his love as a child, maybe I could earn his respect as a man who could get things done. When he got engaged and mentioned that venues were expensive and wedding production was complicated, I heard the opening before he even made the ask. I told him I would handle it. Not partially. Not with discounts. I told him I would handle the full event production as my gift to him. He shook my hand. Not a hug. A handshake. I told myself that was just how he was. The first 4 months were mostly fine in the way things are fine when you are moving too fast to notice the temperature dropping. I booked the rooftop venue at the Harrington Hotel downtown and put the hold on my business card, $12,000. I arranged lighting through a vendor I had worked with for 3 years who gave me a substantial discount because of our relationship. I coordinated florals, catering, a 5-piece jazz band, custom signage, a photo booth, chair rentals, linen selection, table design, cake delivery, and a full-day setup crew from my own team. I did this on top of running my actual business. Early mornings, late nights, weekends. My operations manager, a woman named Keisha who has been with me since year 2, told me 4 different times that I was overextending. That I should bill him something, anything, to create a professional boundary. I told her it was family. She looked at me the way she always does when she thinks I am making a mistake, patient, quiet, and completely unconvinced. I should have listened. The first signal came 6 weeks out. My father mentioned that Carla's daughter, Tessa, had opinions about the design direction and he thought it would be nice if I could coordinate with her directly. I called Tessa. She was polite and had genuinely different taste than what we had discussed, so we found some middle ground. The second signal came 4 weeks out. My father told me that the guest list had expanded by 30 people and asked if I could adjust the seating layout. I did it without complaint. I also quietly ate the additional rental cost. The third signal was 3 weeks out, and it was bigger. He called to tell me that Carla's family had requested the weekend be focused on her side, that the couple wanted the event to feel like a celebration of their new chapter rather than a reunion of old chapters, and that he hoped I would understand if the inner circle was kept very tight. I asked what that meant practically. He said my seat had been moved from the family table to a general guest table near the back. I paused for a long moment. Then I said that was fine and moved on. It was not fine. But I told myself it was. The fourth signal was the text at 6:58 on a Wednesday morning. Don't come. You're not welcome here anymore. I picked the phone back up and called him immediately. He answered on the third ring. His voice was calm. That was the thing about my father, he was always calmest when he was saying something that should have required effort. He said Carla's family had raised concerns. He said they felt my presence created an awkward dynamic. He said some of her relatives didn't know me and he didn't want the day to feel complicated. He said he hoped I understood and that we could celebrate separately sometime soon. I stood in my garage surrounded by candles I had wrapped by hand at midnight and listened to my father explain that I was a complication. I asked if he was planning to cancel the production. He said no. He expected the event to proceed as arranged. I was not invited. But my work was. My money was. My vendor relationships were. My team's labor was. Just not me. I said I needed to think about that. He said he knew I would do the right thing. That phrase, "I know you'll do the right thing," was the sentence my father had used on me my entire life to mean, I know you won't push back. I know you'll fold. I know you've spent enough years trying to earn something from me that you'll accept almost anything to keep the possibility alive. I hung up. I walked back inside. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table. And then I pulled up my laptop and opened the vendor portal. The first thing I did was call Keisha. She answered before the second ring because she always does. And when I told her what had happened, there was a silence on the line that had a very specific texture. The silence of someone choosing not to say I told you so because they love you and know this is not the moment. She asked me one question. What do you want to do? I told her I was going to remove my company's financial and operational involvement from the event. She asked how completely. I said entirely. She said, tell me what you need. That was the moment I understood the difference between the family I was born into and the one I had built. Keisha did not ask if I was sure. She did not suggest I sleep on it. She did not tell me I might regret it. She asked what I needed, because she trusted that I had made a decision that belonged to me. I told her to put together a full inventory of everything we had committed to the event. Equipment, staffing hours, vendor coordination, deposits paid. I wanted the complete picture in one document within the hour. She had it to me in 40 minutes. The number at the bottom made me breathe slowly for a moment. $14,200 in direct expenditures under my business account. An additional $6,000 to $8,000 in vendor discounts, professional favors, and staff hours that I had absorbed without billing. A lighting installation that a vendor had discounted by 30% because of our professional relationship and an understanding that my company was sponsoring the event. A florist who had given me cost pricing on the arrangements because I had sent her 4 referrals this year. The total professional value of what I had put into this wedding was somewhere between $20,000 and $22,000. My father had sent a 7-word text and expected all of it to show up on Saturday anyway. I opened the first vendor portal and started making calls. The venue coordinator was a man named Marcus who had worked with me on corporate events 3 times before this. I kept my voice even when he answered. Professional. Specific. I told him I needed to remove my company's card authorization from the Reeves Pittman wedding scheduled for Saturday evening. He pulled up the file. I heard him typing. He said my card was holding the ceremony to reception transition and the full damage deposit. I said I was aware. I asked him to remove it and transfer the payment responsibility to the primary contract holder, which was my father. He asked if everything was all right. I said I had been removed from the guest list for the event I had organized and financially secured, and that I was no longer comfortable maintaining financial responsibility for an event I was not permitted to attend. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I understand. I'll send the notification to the account holder. If a replacement payment method is not received by end of business Thursday, the venue will need to release the date." I thanked him. I asked for email confirmation. He sent it within 20 minutes. Then I called the lighting vendor. Then the florist. Then the jazz band's booking contact. Then the catering coordinator. Then the rental company handling the chairs and linens. Then the photo booth operator. Then the signage company. Every single call followed the same structure. Professional. Specific. Documented. My phone started ringing at 4:07 p.m. My father. I let it go to voicemail. 4 minutes later. My father again. Voicemail. Then a number I didn't recognize. Then my father's cell again. Then a number with a Greensboro area code that I guessed was Carla's. Then a text from my father that read, "Daniel. Call me right now. The venue is saying our payment is missing." I read it and kept walking. Then, "This is not the time for this." Then, "You are being incredibly selfish." I noticed that not one of those messages said anything about the text he had sent that morning. Not one said the word sorry. Not one acknowledged what he had done. They only acknowledged that something he wanted was now at risk. That told me everything I needed to know about whether I was making the right decision. I texted back once. I said, "I've been removed from the guest list for an event I funded and produced. The financial arrangements have been updated to reflect that. All vendors have your contact information." He called again immediately. This time I answered. His voice was not calm anymore. He said I was being a child. He said I was embarrassing him. He said Carla was devastated. He said I had never been able to handle feeling left out without making it everyone else's problem. I let him talk. When he finished, I said one thing. "Dad. You sent me a text at 7 this morning telling me not to come to a wedding I paid for. I'm returning the favor. I'm not coming. And neither is anything I arranged." He said, "People are counting on this event." I said, then they should have counted me when it mattered. He went quiet for 2 full seconds. That might not sound like much, but my father was never quiet. He filled space. He occupied conversations. 2 seconds of silence from him meant something had landed. Then he said, "You will regret this." I said, "I already regret most of this. But not the part I'm doing right now." And I hung up. Thursday arrived the way difficult days always do, ordinary on the surface and unbearable underneath. By 10 a.m., Keisha had received 3 calls from vendors asking for clarification on payment. She handled each one the same way I had trained her, professionally, without drama, with clear information and documented follow-up. I went into the office and worked a normal morning. Invoices. A client consult for a corporate event in November. A venue walkthrough rescheduled. Normal things. Useful things. At 11:45, a man called my office line and introduced himself as Gary Pittman, Carla's brother. He was polite. I gave him that. He said he understood there had been a family situation and that he was calling on behalf of the couple to find out if there was a path forward. I told him I had withdrawn my professional involvement from the event and that the path forward was for the couple to work directly with the vendors. He asked if there was any amount of money that would change my mind. I said this wasn't about money. It was about being excluded from something I built while being expected to fund it regardless. He said he understood. And then he said something I hadn't expected. He said, "For what it's worth, Robert didn't tell Carla he had sent you that text. She found out this morning. She's not happy with him." I didn't say anything for a moment. He continued, "She's embarrassed. She wanted you there. She thought you had chosen not to come." I sat with that for a second. The specific, exhausting feeling of watching someone you trusted rewrite a story to protect himself from its consequences. I said, "Gary, I hope Carla has a good wedding. I genuinely mean that. But my involvement in the production of it is finished." He said he understood. He thanked me for being direct. He hung up. 20 minutes later, my father called again. This time his voice was different. Not soft, because soft was not something he could manufacture on short notice. But lower. More controlled. He said Carla hadn't known about the text. I said I was aware. He said she was upset with him. I said that seemed reasonable. He said he had made a mistake. I waited to see if he would say anything more specific than that. He didn't. I said, "What was the mistake?" He said he had listened to some people who had concerns and had acted too quickly without thinking about how it would affect me. I noticed he still had not said, "I was wrong to tell you not to come to your own father's wedding." He had not said, "I used your money and your work and then told you you weren't welcome." He had not said anything with the word sorry in it. He had said he acted too quickly. As if the problem were the speed, not the direction. I said, "Dad, when I was growing up, I always knew you saw me as something to manage. I made peace with it because I thought maybe I was reading it wrong. I thought maybe this was my chance to show you I was worth including." He started to say something. I kept going. "You sent me that text at 7 in the morning while I was in my garage wrapping candles I had bought for your wedding. And not one of the messages you've sent since then has been about me. They've all been about the venue, the vendors, the money. I am not a vendor. I'm your son." Silence. "If you figure out the difference, you have my number." And I hung up. Thursday afternoon, the venue sent formal notice that without a replacement payment method by 5 p.m., the Saturday reservation would be released. By 4:52 p.m., my father had not provided one. At 5:01 p.m., the Harrington Hotel's event department released the rooftop reservation. It was gone. At 5:23, the lighting vendor confirmed they had reallocated the crew to another booking. At 5:40, the florist confirmed that without a deposit, she could not hold the arrangements past Friday morning. By Thursday evening, a wedding that had taken 4 months to build had been dismantled in approximately 36 hours. Not by explosions. Not by shouting. Not by any of the dramatic gestures people expect from revenge stories. Just by paperwork. By phone calls. By the quiet, methodical removal of everything I had put in. My father did not call again Thursday evening. Carla's brother texted me at 7:30 p.m. He said they were working on an alternative. He said he was sorry for how things had gone. He said Carla wanted me to know she had not been part of the decision. I thanked him. I meant it. I heated up leftovers and watched a documentary and went to bed at a reasonable hour for the first time in 4 months. Friday arrived with 34 messages I had not responded to overnight. Family members. A cousin who asked what was happening. An uncle who said he had heard things were complicated. A woman I identified as Carla's sister who had somehow gotten my number and wanted to know if the ceremony location had changed. I did not respond to most of them. Keisha came in at 8 and gave me the kind of look that meant she had information. She said 3 separate people connected to the wedding had called the main office line asking if we were still providing services. She had told each of them that our company had withdrawn from the engagement and that all inquiries should go directly to the client. I asked how they had sounded. She said panicked was probably the right word. I nodded and poured coffee. At 9:15, my father arrived at my office. I did not know he was coming. He had not called. He simply appeared in the doorway of my front office in a sport coat he wore when he wanted to look serious, and my receptionist sent him back to me with wide eyes because she knew the general shape of the situation. He sat down across from my desk. He looked, for the first time in my memory, like a man who was trying to figure out how to do something he had no experience doing. He said, "I need you to fix this." I said, "I know that's why you're here." He said, "The venue is gone. The lighting company won't call me back. The florist said the flowers are already broken down." I said, "Yes." He said, "Daniel." I said, "Dad." He looked at his hands. I waited. I had learned, somewhere in the past 48 hours, that waiting was its own kind of power. He needed to get somewhere by himself. No amount of me pulling him toward it would mean anything. Finally he said, in a voice that I had never heard from him before, something that was not an explanation and was not a justification and was not a pivot toward what he needed. He said, "I don't know how to treat you right. I know I've never gotten it right. But I didn't understand that until I saw what happened when I took it for granted." I sat very still. He said, "I don't know how to ask for what I'm asking." I said, "Then just say it directly." He said, "Will you help me?" Not a question. Not quite. More like something he was lowering to the floor and hoping I would pick up. I looked at him for a long moment. At the man who had shaken my hand at his engagement instead of hugging me. Who had moved my seat to the back of his own wedding. Who had sent 7 words at 7 in the morning and then spent 2 days calling about money. I said, "I'm not going to restore the original event. That's gone." He nodded. I said, "But I can help you put something real together by tomorrow. Not what we had. Something simpler. Something honest." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I mean a wedding that looks like what you can actually put together in 24 hours, which is modest and real and not built on someone else's labor and someone else's money and someone else's professional goodwill. I mean something that belongs to you and Carla instead of something I built for you." He was quiet. I said, "And I'm going to be there." He looked up. I said, "Not because you've earned it. Because she didn't do anything wrong and she deserves to have her wedding witnessed. But going forward, you and I are going to have a different kind of relationship. I am not your event producer. I am not your emergency contact. I am not the answer to problems you created. I'm your son. If you want that relationship, I'm available for it. If you want the other one, I'm not." He said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Okay." Just that. One word. No performance. No handshake. Okay. The wedding happened on Saturday. Not on the Harrington rooftop with 200 guests and custom lighting and a jazz band. At a small garden space attached to a historic home that a colleague of mine rented out for private events, which I was able to book on 24 hours' notice because I had helped the owners with their own event 2 years earlier and they owed me a favor I had never called in. 60 people. The ones who mattered. Simple white chairs. The florist had a few arrangements left that I purchased at full price, and they were enough. A cousin who played guitar at church agreed to play during the ceremony. The catering became a catered brunch the next morning instead of a formal dinner reception, which actually, if you heard anyone describe it afterward, sounded like a better choice. My father and Carla stood under a pergola covered in climbing roses that were already there, not arranged by anyone, not curated for any mood board. They just existed in that garden and happened to be beautiful. I sat in the third row. Not the back. Not the family table I had been assigned to before all of this. Not somewhere calculated by anyone's comfort level or image management. The third row, because that was where the available seat was, and I sat in it and watched my father get married and felt something I had not expected to feel. Not triumph. Not satisfaction in the cinematic sense. Just truth. The room was small enough that you could hear everything. The vows were not polished. Carla cried twice. My father's voice broke once, which I had never heard in my life and did not know what to do with. Her kids stood beside her. I sat in the third row. At the end, when they kissed and everyone applauded and the guitarist played something warm and the 60 people who loved them the most moved toward them with hugs and congratulations, in that moment, I thought about what the original event would have looked like. Curated. Expensive. Impressive. And entirely built on a foundation that required me to disappear so that it could stand. This was smaller. This was real. This had required my father to scramble, to ask for help directly, to say okay to the terms I had set. This had required Carla to get married in a garden instead of on a rooftop, and she had done it with more grace than I had expected from someone whose fiancé had caused the problem. This was what the wedding looked like when I was allowed to be in it. I found that I preferred it. After the ceremony, Carla found me near the garden fence while everyone was finding seats for the informal reception. She was still in her dress. She looked tired and genuinely happy in the way people look when they have gotten through something difficult to reach something true. She said, "Thank you for coming." I said, "Thank you for not knowing." She looked at me for a moment, then she said, "He has a lot to learn about the difference between someone being useful and someone being there." I said, "Yes." She said, "I'm going to help him learn it." I believed her. I don't know why exactly, but I did. She squeezed my arm and went back to her husband. My father found me about an hour later, at the edge of the garden while people were finishing their food and a small speaker someone had brought was playing something quiet and acoustic. He stood beside me and looked out at the garden. He said, "This was better than what I had planned." I said, "It was more honest." He said, "I'm going to try to be better at this." I said, "I know." He said, "You don't believe me." I said, "I believe you mean it right now. I'll believe the rest when I see it over time." He nodded. He didn't argue with that, which was itself a small piece of evidence. We stood there for a few minutes without talking, which was also something I don't have memory of us doing before. Just standing in the same place, in the same moment, not needing the silence to be filled. It wasn't repaired. One conversation in a garden cannot repair 40 years of a particular kind of distance. But it was honest. And honesty, I have learned, is the only foundation that holds. The following Monday, I went back to the warehouse. Keisha had kept everything organized, because she always does. The candles I had wrapped were still in their boxes. The centerpieces I had assembled were still on the prep table. Some of it could be reused for upcoming client events. Some of it I would need to repackage and rebook. I stood in the middle of the space and ran through the math. I had lost approximately $14,000 in direct costs. I had absorbed additional losses in staff time and vendor relationship capital. Some of that would never come back. What came back was something different. I had spent 8 years building a business on the belief that my professionalism was my value. And in trying to earn my father's respect the same way, I had forgotten that professionalism is not the same as love, and that someone who only values you for your capability has not yet seen you. My father had looked at me across a garden on Saturday, and for the first time in my memory, he had not been calculating what I could produce. He had just been standing next to his son. That was worth more than $14,000. I am not going to pretend that forgiveness is simple or that the damage from a lifetime of conditional love dissolves because of one garden wedding and one honest conversation. It doesn't. I still have work to do with the therapist I started seeing last year. I still have patterns I am learning to recognize. I still catch myself reaching for usefulness when what I actually want is connection. But I also know this. The moment I removed my card from that venue reservation, I stopped participating in my own diminishment. And the moment I sat in the third row of my father's wedding, not invited, not excluded, but present on my own terms, I understood something I had been trying to learn my whole life. You cannot earn the love of someone who has decided your value is conditional. But you can stop paying for the privilege of being overlooked. You can close the wallet. Remove the card. Cancel the delivery. And you can make it very clear that your presence has always been the most valuable thing you had to offer. Not your labor. Not your money. Not your professional network or your discounts or your Saturday crew. You. And any relationship, family, friend, or anything in between, that cannot see that difference is not a relationship worth subsidizing. If someone in your life has ever made you feel useful without making you feel valued, if you have ever been the person they call when they need something and skip when they're celebrating, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened in that garden on a Saturday afternoon proved something I want you to hear. The moment you stop funding your own invisibility is the moment you become impossible to ignore.